Hi there everybody, this is Marcus. Welcome back. Today we're actually going to talk about different types of variables. So we're still in the Hello World program, and remember we created a string called x and we set that to null. Well, that string x is what's known as a variable. So that's basically, a memory location where we actually store some type of data. Now, we have a couple different variables that I'm actually going to go over. So we're going to start off with string, which you've already seen. I'm going to go back over that one. Now there is also char, which is basically a single character. So you can go with A, B, C, whatever you want to. We also have what's known as a boolean, which is a true or false. You have an integer, which is just a basic number, no decimals or anything like that. And then you have real numbers, which are floats, doubles, and decimals. And those all have decimals in them. So we're going to start off with string. And with the hello world, we're back here. We've got how are you today? And we've already got it to where it's got the read line, and we will actually output what we actually wrote. So if we actually run this, we've got how are you today, and we'll just say fine, thanks. You see that it printed out fine, thanks right there. So now what we want to do is we want to actually change this to char, and we want the lowercase one. And as you see, it is a non-nullable value. So what we actually need to do is we need to, you can put a question mark here, which causes it to be a nullable value, so you can actually set it to null. So as you can see, console.readLine, there's the error down here. Basically it cannot convert string to a char. So what you need to do for it to actually basically take the input of the character, you need to actually have, instead of read line, you need to have read key, then dot, and key char. So what this does is whenever this actually runs, it will basically ask this question, which basically means nothing right now. But whenever you take the keystroke and you hit a key, what it's going to do is it's going to actually run through this code, and then it's going to run through this code. So it'll automatically output. So if we go ahead and run it, we see we've got how are you today, and we hit J. It automatically outputs it and puts it on the same line. So that's the way to actually do an individual character. Most of the time I don't really see individual characters being used that much. There's a couple places that you would use it, but most of the time you'll end up using an actual number or something like that. So what we want to do now is let's take this and we're going to change it into an int. So now this is an actual integer, and what you want to do is, like most variables, you want to actually set it as something. And just like the char, you cannot set it to a null. So once again, I want to sit there and actually put the question mark in front of it, so it actually gets inputted. It can be null, which later on you'll learn that that is a good thing for database usage, because there's sometimes that you'll input data into a database that can actually be null, and unless you set it this way, you're not really going to be able to set it as a null in the database unless you actually work around it. So now, as far as this goes, we've got an int and it's set to null. So now what we want to actually do is we want to go back to our console dot read line, and as you see that there's an error here, and it says that you can't convert a string to an integer. So what we have to do is we actually have to convert it beforehand. So what we'll do is we'll actually say convert dot to int32, and we'll actually put this inside of parentheses. So now the reason behind that is with console.readline, whenever it actually gets the input, it brings it in as a string. So in order to put it into this data type, we have to actually convert it to that data type. So now whenever we actually run it, we can sit there and we just put 22 and it pops out with 22 right here. So that is basic integers. With this, you're not really going to go into decimals or anything like that. It's not as precise as float, double, or decimal. It's just a regular number. So, you know, like, how old are you? Stuff like that. So now, if we actually change this to a float, it basically works the same way. Now, to actually convert this correctly, we need to change this to single. Now, most of the time, whenever you actually convert something, you'll just say to and whatever it is. Well, the float is slightly different, and actually to do a float, you actually, like, if you want to set it to an actual number, so we actually take this and we have it just like this to where it's not null, and say we want it 3.33. Okay, it's not going to actually read right because it's reading as a double, but what we actually need to do is we need to put an F behind it. That way it reads it as a float, because what's going to happen is a float is not as precise as a double or a decimal, and it actually takes up less space. So with floats, you're looking at up to about 7 digits, which is precise for most things. A double goes up to about 15 to 16 digits, and it takes up, you know, more memory than the actual float does. So float and double are the ones that you're going to use most of the time. Decimal is very rare to actually use, and it takes up a lot of actual memory compared to float and double. and it's up to 28 to 29 places. So for right now, we're just going to actually stick with the actual float, and I'm going to show you how this one works. So we just start it, and we can go in and put 33.33, and it basically outputs. Now if we actually run it again and we put in 5, it's going to output 5, because technically it's reading 5.00 and just basically taking that off. Now if we were to change this back to an int and try to run it that way, int 32, now we're going to actually run this program, and like I said before, if we just put in 5, it runs correctly. So if we actually run it again and we put in 5.5, it ends up crashing, because it's basically saying that there's an error occurred and it cannot change what you inputted to an actual integer, because it's considered a float or a double. So that is basically most of the actual variables that you will actually use today. And one more, we'll go over bool, because what bool is true or false. So you can actually set that to false whenever you first start it. So basically this is used for multiple statements, which we'll actually get into later, like if statements. So basically you'll say, if something is true, then do this, or if something is false, then do this. If it's not that, then do something else. I'll actually show more of this later on, but as of right now, you basically seen the string, the char, the integer, float, double, decimal, and like I said, most of those, the float, double, and decimal work together. The int is basically by itself, and then you have the string and the char, which take an individual character or a string of characters and can actually output them. So this is where we actually end this tutorial. The next tutorial I'll have up soon, and most likely it'll actually start going over simple math and doing like simple equations and stuff with integer, float, and stuff like that. So just stay tuned. If you like these tutorials, help me get out there. Just like, subscribe, and comment. That way I can get out there and actually help other people with my tutorials. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.